For the first time in almost a decade, Florida State has finally beaten the Clemson Tigers 31-24 in overtime and retaken control of the ACC. And man, what a football game. I know I'm a little bit late here, but it's been a hectic few days, and to be honest, I don't even really know where to start here other than just enjoy the moment, enjoy the win. Obviously, it wasn't perfect, but you got the win against Clemson, and you did it on the road in Death Valley. And I'm not going to be negative here at all just because this was such a massive step for this program. Just for the scope of what's happened, for starters, Clemson does not lose in that stadium. Since 2014, they are 61-3 at home, including the game this past Saturday. Clemson just does not lose in Death Valley. It's a loud stadium. It's a very tough environment to play in. Maybe even the toughest environment Florida State will play in all season. Also, Clemson went up 10-0. Davis Swinney was 81-1 when leading by 10 or more points. He's now 81-2, thankfully. But that goes to show you how rare it is to do what Florida State did this past weekend. Florida State has not beaten Clemson since 2014, and even that was an overtime win. Dak Prescott was still playing college football the last time Florida State beat Clemson. What the Noles did on Saturday was a huge deal, no doubt about it, and it's even bigger for the implications of the season and this program. In 2022, you finally beat both of your rivals in Florida and Miami, but you still had a frustrating loss at home to Clemson yet again. Now this year, you went and blew out a top LSU team to start the season, and now you've finally gotten the Clemson monkey off your back. I'm so happy as a fan, but I'm also really happy for Coach Norvell and for this team. No one on this team outside of Jaheim Bell has ever beaten Clemson. And some of these guys like Jordan Travis, Akeem Dent, Darius Washington, they've all been here for a long time, since 2018, 2019, and just now for the first time have beaten Clemson. And it's even cooler because this is exactly what a lot of these guys came back for, to go for it all. That's why they came back for their senior season, was to beat these teams that they haven't beat in almost a decade. All that said, just a huge, huge statement for the Noles here. Now, this is also the reason I'm not buying that whole excuse of Clemson missed a field goal, and that's the only reason Florida State won. Florida State got lucky. I'm not buying that because, for one, luck went both ways in this game. Did FSU get lucky that Clemson missed a field goal? Sure. But Florida State lost a few games last year because of missed field goals, too. That's part of the game. It is what it is. And even in the Clemson game, there was quite a few missed calls, including one late where the Clemson defense held Keon Coleman on what could have likely been a touchdown catch to win the game without even going to overtime. So like I said, luck, toughness, it all went both ways in this one, and Florida State still pulled out a massive win. Now, I don't necessarily have an outline here in place, but I think I'll start with Jordan Travis. I mean, what an absolute warrior performance out of him. It was obvious when he first came out in that shoulder brace that he wasn't quite 100% from whatever injury he got during the Boston College game. And then even in this game, he took quite a few shots, but just kept getting back up and kept marching back out there, doing whatever it took to win this game. He didn't run quite as much as I would initially have thought going into the game, but I didn't realize how banged up he actually was. So still to go against that defense, not 100% healthy, to have no turnovers, and put the ball in the right spot when it matters most, I mean, there's almost just no words for it. Absolute warrior performance out of Jordan Travis this weekend, and very glad he's a Florida State quarterback. Now, like I said, it wasn't a perfect game, and it definitely didn't start out great, but they cleaned up a lot of stuff in the second half. I mean, if you look at the halftime adjustment on the defensive side of the ball especially, it's pretty impressive. And that's one thing Adam Fuller does do well, despite his flaws. He does make good second half adjustments, almost always. That being said, you gave up just 7 points in the second half, but to that point, you also scored 7 points on defense, with Kalen DeLoach coming down like a heat-sinking missile on Cade Klubnik, a major sack to force a fumble that was then bobbled by Braden Fisk, and almost lateraled to Kalen DeLoach, who ran it back for a touchdown. Now, not only was it a gnarly play, but it came at a crucial point in the game where Clemson was kind of marching and getting in position to go up by 2 scores on you, and then boom, a few seconds later, it's tie ball game, and you have all the momentum towards the end of the game. Now, especially if this season ends up as special as we think it can, that play is going to be remembered for a long time. We'll be looking back on that play the way we do some of the 2012, 2013 plays and even older ones. It's definitely fitting that he got to be the guy to break the rock. Now on to another number 4, Keon Coleman. Man, I'm glad he came to FSU. We may very well be a 2-2 team right now had it not been for Keon Coleman. He was under some pretty heavy contact throughout this whole game. I mean, the Clemson corners were playing pretty physical on him. And I think there was quite a few missed calls. We'll get into that later. But he had a tough task against a really good Clemson secondary. He still came up clutch when it mattered the most, scoring the first touchdown of the game for Florida State, then the final game winner in overtime, reeling in an absolute dime from Jordan Travis. On that note, the game-winning touchdown pass in overtime was also the record-breaking touchdown for Jordan Travis to have the most touchdowns in Florida State history. You gotta love that. You gotta love number 4 Kalen DeLoach on the scoop and score. You gotta love number 4 Keon Coleman catching the game winner in overtime. Keon Coleman and Kalen DeLoach were actually interviewed together after the game, and apparently called themselves 4 for 4, which I thought was pretty cool. Now onto the offense a little bit. I definitely still think they're trying to find an identity. Obviously, Mike Norvell prides himself on being able to run the football well, and it's crucial to being a well-balanced offense. But we've seen the running game kind of struggle a little bit early on. I think in this bye week we'll see some personnel changes. They're going to try to shuffle some things around and put it together. I'd imagine. You obviously have several elite wide receivers, but it all works better if it's complementary. You really need to get that run game going, and then the passing game on offense can shine even better. So, like I said, especially with the bye week coming up, I think we'll see them start to kind of get it all sorted out and put it together a little bit and find a true identity. Now, one thing is for sure though, when it comes to playing football, this team is good, talented, and incredibly tough and resilient. It hasn't always been pretty. We've seen the first half of the LSU game, the Boston College game was almost a disaster, and the Clemson game was very, very tough. But they find a way to lean on their leadership and their toughness, and they get the job done every time. And I think it just speaks volumes about the team, the coaching staff, how far they've come. A couple years ago, Florida State wins none of these kinds of games. The close games with Boston College, the road games in overtime against Clemson, blowing out LSU, none of that happens a couple years ago. So the program, by way of transfers, coaching, has come a long way. And as a Florida State fan, it's really been awesome to see. But I think it also speaks volumes to how far this team can go. Even this year, you're already 4-0, and you can control your destiny to get to the playoffs and hopefully further. But what a great time to be a Florida State fan. You've now gotten through the toughest month of your schedule. You're undefeated heading into a bye week to get healthy, clean some things up, and then take on the rest of your schedule, starting with Virginia Tech at home. But that being said, what do you guys see as the toughest game left off Florida State's schedule? Let me know in the comments, and let's talk Noles.